is all about. Glenn Fowler is ACT Branch Secretary of the Australian Education Union, and he's right across the Gonski plan and joins me online now. Glenn, very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Luke. Nice to be with you.
Yeah, nice to be with you too. You're very, very faint, Glenn, so I'm going to have to really concentrate on what you're saying. We're at Ronald McDonald House, and sometimes it's very difficult to hear. But, Glenn, can you explain for our listeners exactly what the Gonski report is all about? And to your knowledge, will Christopher Pyne follow through?
Well, after today, there's serious doubt about that. I mean, this is a stunning broken promise so early in the Abbott government's term. It might just be his carbon tax moment. When you look at the words, 8 days ago, Christopher Pyne said, over the next 4 years, we will maintain the new school funding model and the budget that went with it. 8 days later, yesterday, he said, we're going back to the drawing board. Abbott said on the 2nd of August before the election, we will honour the agreements that Labor has entered into. We will match the offers that Labor has made. We think that money is important. We will make sure that no school is worse off. Now Pyne is saying he wants to renegotiate agreements with the sign-up states and territories, and he won't guarantee that no school is worse off. I mean, there's quote after quote after quote where they've gone back completely on what they promised before the election.
So he's saying, I don't need to answer questions, things will go okay. Then I heard on our news bulletin, I think it was at 4 o'clock, that he said, we'll go along reasonably the same line, but we might change a few things next year. It all sounds very, very vague. Just before we go into more about what he had to say, just explain the Gonski report. It was brought about by businessman David Gonski, and it was an independent panel. And basically, from what I understand, they were addressing declining student performances and a lack of adequate coordination within the current education model to address student needs. And there were discrepancies with children's performances depending on class sizes and socio-economic groups. And it was basically a way to try and even it all out and get the same education for every child in Australia, correct?
Absolutely. It was a 6-person independent panel, and they found the evidence loud and clear after an extensive process of consultation, visiting school after school right across the country and education stakeholders. And it simply said that too many kids are falling through the gaps, and it is starting to affect Australia's performance internationally. It can be tracked back to the initiation of the SES funding model in 2001, which the panel made very clear is completely broken. It was putting money where it was needed the least and ignoring kids that needed it the most. And what we now say is that every child deserves a certain amount of funding per year, and that if they have complex factors which are inhibiting their learning, that those factors will be addressed by loadings, be they students with disabilities, students from non-English speaking backgrounds, students from remote areas, students from Indigenous backgrounds, and students from poor backgrounds. It's a model which has widespread community support. 90% of Australians believed before the election that it needed to be implemented. That's why Abbott changed his position after many months of spoiling on this. Changed his position to say that he was on a unity ticket. Their own polling told him that they were losing this one. They sought to neutralise Labor's advantage on education, and they made the statements that I've already read to you. They are clearly going back on that now, and it won't just be people like me that are being highly critical of this. Barry O'Farrell, the Liberal Premier of New South Wales, and the Education Minister there, Adrian Pigley, have come out and slammed Christopher Pyne today. Dennis Napthine, the Liberal Premier from Victoria, has slammed him as well. The Labor Premiers have, of course, slammed him as you'd expect. The ramifications of this major spoiling based on some sort of manufactured crisis today is just the opportunity that Christopher Pyne was looking for to demonstrate that in his heart of hearts he does not believe in fairness and in equity and in a model that is not only right but smart and will improve the nation's productivity. This is an urgent reform. David Gonski said that very strongly. There's no time for mucking around with this stuff, and we know that all state governments that have signed up to this will make it very clear on Friday to Christopher Pyne that this is not on. Tony Abbott needs to rein him in.
Well, I just wonder what's brought about this change of mind. I mean, I know that under Gonski's new system, he was saying, look, every school in Australia is now going to receive consistent funding per student. Have they just decided there's no money there?
Well, the question is, do they prefer the old model? The old model...
I think he does.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree with you, because it comes down to a question of whether you believe that every child in this country deserves the same opportunity and deserve the resources that they need. That is not the case at the moment. You have money being funnelled off to the schools that need it the least, based on a sense of historical entitlement and a patchwork quilt of arrangements. Gonski said this has got to stop. We need to look at every child. We need to be sector blind. We need to treat them the same and decide what they need to do their best at school. This is a no-brainer. That's why Australians have signed up to it, holus bolus. That's why Abbott knew he had to jump on board before the election, or it was going to cost him. And now we have this backflip. It's really despicable stuff. So far it's been Pyne in charge. Abbott needs to get control of him. Christopher Pyne is an ideologue on these matters. He believes in rich schools being richer, and he needs to haul him in because it's going to damage him. I'm really looking forward to the next opinion poll. I reckon 3 percentage points damage done in 24 hours.
I think you're probably right. And the reason Tony Abbott's not jumping on him today is because he's got his hands full elsewhere about issues that aren't necessarily his fault, but it's an issue that he has to look into. Yeah. And I'm talking about our relationship with Indonesia. But sure. This is very, very important. And you're quite right. I'm talking with Glenn Fowler, ACT Branch Secretary of the Australian Education Unit, about the Gonski procedure that now looks like not going ahead. We don't know what Christopher Pyne wants to do. I think, like Glenn, he probably wants the old model reinstated. I don't know. But the thing that you said, Glenn, which is quite true, I've never seen such a popular bipartisan decision made by all the states. Everybody loved this. Everybody loved this proposal.
Yeah, and we know what the alternative to this proposal is. It's what's currently occurring in Queensland, Northern Territory and WA. These are the three holdout jurisdictions, all with Liberal leaders, all doing their best to please Abbott and Pyne, and the cost of that has been that their states don't have the money to appropriately fund education. We have cuts. In Northern Territory at the moment, tens of millions of dollars being pulled out, and some schools losing up to 7 teachers. Industrial action by teachers up there at the moment is to unprecedented levels. There is absolute outrage on the steps of Parliament House in those 3 states which stubbornly held that they didn't want Commonwealth money, that they didn't want to commit to growth education budgets into the future, and they wanted to retain the right to cut education budgets when things got tough. So we've seen the alternative.
Yeah, no, I understand, Glenn. And let me tell you something, an observation I made when talking to an old friend of mine at a school reunion. She's a primary school teacher, has been since she left university. And I said, what do you think, what do you make of the Gonski report? Will it improve things? She said, oh, absolutely. But she said, I bet it doesn't go through. She told me that at her primary school, sometimes she has to teach 36, 37 students. And she said, what the shame of all that is, it's only the bright ones which are getting ahead. She said, I don't have time to talk to the kids who really do need my help. They're falling further and further and further behind. And she said, it's breaking my heart. That's primary school. Now, I reckon primary school is probably the most important tier of education in this country, and I think it's suffering greatly.
Well, every dollar you spend there, you'll save 7 down the track. And what we're seeing at the moment is kids don't get the individual attention they require to suit their particular learning needs. And we're seeing that the specialist teachers aren't available to be able to help the kids that have the special needs. This is what Gonski promises right across the country. This extra money will bring us up to the OECD average. We're currently 15% behind the OECD average in terms of funding. And that is causing us to slide down the international rankings based on sample testing conducted by PISA. This is incredibly daft. It has to stop. Very few people don't see that. Christopher Pyne's never seen it. He's not there to govern for all Australians. He's there to govern for a privileged elite. There's no surprise in this. He wants to retain the market advantage of elite private schools. And so, no surprise. But Tony Abbott, one would expect, not only would look at this in a different way, with his the certain commitments that he's made to social justice over the years, but also can see the political damage that this is doing. We have a minister out of control.